I've never seen somebody so like honed in and locked in.
Leonard Fournette, and I'm locked in my dog Norman Locke, baby.
And we're back. It's the Daily Lock-In each and every day from 6 to 7 right here on YouTube. Norman Locke's YouTube channel, ESPN 1420 ESP in 103 The Game. I'm here with my guy, Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, which you can get on all DSPs. You can watch on YouTube. You can get on Spotify. You can get on iTunes. What's up, Ross?
What's good, brother? Appreciate you having me on, man. Always glad to talk with you.
Oh man, I'm doing better than the Saints are right now.
Ain't that the truth?
I hate to say it, but 2 back-to-back winnable games that the Saints go down to lose in the fourth quarter. Back-to-back losses aren't good for anyone. How do you think the Saints are taking 2 back-to-back losses with close games?
Look, I mean, they're frustrated. I mean, if you listen to, Coach Payton, he was on, on a radio show last night on Monday night. He was also spending some time, of course, with New Orleans media in the morning on the teleconference call, as well as, pressers and things like that after the game. And he's frustrated, and I'm sure this team is very frustrated as well. This is a team that's used to, coming out up against adversity and finding a way to win. And all of a sudden, over the course of these last couple of games, yeah, they've come back from some multi-score deficits, but haven't been able to finish the job late in the game, whether it's because of a big busted coverage. Oh, not even a big busted coverage. Paulson Adebo being, a half a step out of position on Cordero Patterson made all the difference. A false start penalty on a 2-point conversion might have backed the Saints up out of being able to convert that 2-point conversion, but they also haven't converted a 2-point conversion over their last 8 tries, including that try. So with that all being the case, I mean, this is a team that's very frustrated, that feels like it should, they should have won over these last 2 games and haven't been able to close it out late.
Now, Trevor Siemian, over these last 2 games, what's your thought process on him as the heir to the throne after Jameis Winston went down with an ACL injury? How do you think his development as the quarterback position has come along these last 2 games?
Yeah, look, I don't think he's done anything wrong. I think you don't want to take 2 sacks back to back in a 2-minute drill situation where you're trying to build momentum for your team, like what happened at the end of the first half up against the Tennessee Titans. But, he's been a ball distributor. He has gotten the ball out. He has, done what he needs to do to try to get whatever he can out of this passing game that the Saints are have really struggled to get going all season, all told. I mean, Jameis Winston was just starting to get the passing game going before his injury. And even still, with the receivers, with the options that they have right now, it was going to be a struggle throughout this entire season. Trevor Siemian isn't going to make receivers. He's not going to be somebody like Drew Brees that's going to elevate the players around him. He's going to need the players around him to elevate. And we've seen examples of that. I mean, we saw Mark Ingram really come back to life in the New Orleans Saints system last week in the loss. We also saw Deontay Harris continue to, ball out and show that he can be a bit more of a complete receiver than maybe anticipated at his stature. But, when it comes down to what Trevor Siemian can do, it reminds me a lot of when the Saints had to turn to Teddy Bridgewater a couple of years ago, to where he's not necessarily going to lose you games, but I think you have a little bit more question mark around him about whether or not he can actually win you games as well. And so far, he's come up a little short, either with situations outside of his control or earlier situations sort of making the bed for late in the game.
Now, we talked about this wide receiving core. Now, all season, that's been the talk of the New Orleans Saints, the lack of production from the wide receiver core. I mean, I think it's gotten to the point where it's at its worst when Mark Ingram is one of the leading pass catchers and receivers on the team. And, Mark Ingram is never known for his hands. He had some pretty sweet catches in this game against the Titans, but how has his locker room presence at least elevated the morale of the Saints?
Yeah, I think it absolutely has done that. And I think it's done that really well. I mean, I think, you go into before when Mark Ingram had rejoined this team, you go into a game without Alvin Kamara and it's kind of a death knell, right? Like there's no, you just assume, all right, well, they're just going to pack it in and get ready for the next game up against Philadelphia Eagles. And hopefully they'll have AK back at that point. But because you have Mark Ingram, who had been a starter in this system before, that hasn't changed too terribly much since he departed after the 2018 season. felt a little bit more comfortable going in, and certainly the Saints felt a little bit more comfortable going in. Now, their game plan still had to change a little bit when Ty Montgomery ended up having the pinky injury and had to leave the game for the game. That was a little queasy there for a moment with that one, and the way that they love to show that on broadcast. But that was a situation to where a lot of Alvin Kamara's playbook would have been maintained by Ty Montgomery. Now, was he going to have the same production as Alvin Kamara? Probably not, but you still have more of your playbook available to you when you have that hybrid sort of receiver / running back. But as you mentioned, Mark Ingram went out there, made a couple of nice catches, including the big wheel route down the left sideline to show you that he can still contribute in that way too.
Now, Mark Ingram, he passed Deuce McAllister as the all-time leading rusher. How big is that for Mark Ingram? Do you think he keeps that record? Do you think Alvin Kamara maybe breaks the record in the future? How does going forward Mark Ingram's tender with the Saints go is?
Yeah, I mean, look, they gave him an extension, or let me rephrase that. They somehow convinced the Texans to give him an extension for them. So I think, he'll have his opportunity to continue to extend that record, ideally not only through this season, but potentially through 2022 as well. Now, Mark Ingram is on the older side when it comes to running backs in the NFL, of course. But I think that he has the opportunity to at least be able to hold on to that record for a little while. If there is anybody that is going to surpass him for it in the near future, though, of course, it's Alvin Kamara, who's really staring down the tunnel at every New Orleans Saints record that you can imagine, essentially, just 5 years through his career. It's pretty incredible, the production that he's had so far.
Now, the defense. Let's talk about the Saints defense. Going into the season, they had major questions about the defense, major questions about the secondary, major questions about the depth at linebacker, defensive line. And the Saints defense has played well and better, I'll say even elite at times.
Mm-hmm.
This game against the Titans, I can't put my finger on it, but what would happen to Latimer?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing, right? I mean, you watch him go out there and go up against some of the best wide receivers this season. I mean, you look at what he did against Terry McLaurin, for instance, over in Washington, an incredible game up against him, and then comes back and gives up basically 100 receiving yards on 5 catches to Marcus Johnson. And a lot of people are going, who? I mean, it's an interesting situation to watch. But also, I think that, credit to the Tennessee Titans for doing a good job of finding a way to produce in the passing game when your top receiver and AJ Brown had 1 catch. They held AJ Brown to a single catch in this game, and a lot of that was Bradley Roby. Some of it was Paulson Adebo as well. But I don't think that the Titans necessarily came into this game thinking that AJ Brown was going to be the entire offense. They love Marcus Johnson. I mean, he was a big training camp standout, and not every training camp standout pans out, as we know very well in New Orleans, but this one panned out against New Orleans in this game. And I think that that's a credit to the Tennessee Titans for creating a game plan that sort of takes you opposite your expectation. But also, I mean, there are some question marks in terms of what it is that the New Orleans Saints need to do to pad up and sort of fix some of the issues where they are a little bit more porous on defense, particularly crossing routes that take them over the middle, and then yards after catch continue to be a bit of an issue for this team as well.
Now, do you think we all watched the kicking woes that happened this past game? It just seems like the NFL is having immense kicker problems. We need a kickers. Somebody start coming up with something. What do you think Sean Payton and New Orleans Saints go at the kicker position for the remainder of the season?
I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to ride it out with Brian Johnson, at least for another week or two. Look, I think 2 missed extra points. There's the only thing you can do is look at that and say, did you make it or did you not make it? And if you didn't make it, then you have every right to be disappointed in it. But for the Saints, this is if you include Will Lutz, their 5th kicker of the season. And I don't know that you can go to a 6th kicker and expect to really improve. I mean, this is also the same guy that's 7-7 in field goals for you. Remember the guy before that? He wasn't. So I think that there's a little bit of a trade-off here to where you have to look at it and say, okay, bad moments, terrible moments, and a bad time, right? Of course, you have those 2 extra points, and then you're kicking an extra point to win the game as opposed to going for a 2-point conversion to tie the game late in that one if everything else played out the way that it did. So I think that for the Saints, there's a lot of reason for concern. There's a lot of reason to question what the Saints are going to do at the kicker spot, but I just can't see a reality in which they go somewhere or go to somebody else and then all of a sudden they're just fine moving forward. So I think that they'll probably ride it out with Brian Johnson. If there's an opportunity to get Jake Verity, the guy who's been sitting on the practice squad for the Baltimore Ravens, but of course Jake Verity has to agree to that as well. The Saints can't just bring him to New Orleans against his will. They'll have to convince him to do that. Then I think maybe that's the one place where you can actually go somewhere and get better at this point in the season. But as of right now, I think you just continue to roll out with Brian Johnson, show some confidence in him, and hopefully his confidence continues to rise.
Now, another position that I think might have some movement is the quarterback position. Do you think we'll see more of a heavy dose of Taysom Hill going against the Philadelphia Eagles or going forward in the season? Or do you think Sean Payton stays with Trevor Siemian?
Yeah, I've been pretty convinced that eventually we're gonna see more Taysom Hill under center. I don't know if that means that he becomes the full term starter or if that just means that certain game plans include him more under center. And I could see the Philadelphia Eagles game being that game. This is going to be a big time battle for time of possession because of what Philly can do on the ground, not only with their stable of running backs, but also with their quarterback and Jalen Hurts. And I could see the Saints kind of trying to fight fire with fire in that case and try to dominate time of possession with a heavy run game. And that might lend itself a little bit more towards a Taysom Hill heavy game. Now, again, does that mean that he becomes the starter and that he starts taking all the snaps under center? That remains to be seen. But I do think that we start seeing more and more of Taysom Hill as long as he continues to be healthy. I think that concussion, that hit that he took was scary. 3 weeks in concussion protocol. I understand the idea of being cautious around him, but they also had him playing, in punt coverage. They had him playing at fullback as a lead blocker in this last game. So clearly they're okay with where Taysom Hill is in his recovery, but the processing portion of quarterbacking is something that maybe isn't the same as what you would read physically on a screen. And instead, it's something that you kind of just have to know about the mentality of the player. So you can really gauge that in practice more than you can gauge that on game film. So we'll see if the practice week gives them enough confidence to be able to continue to move forward with more Taysom under center. But I do think that eventually we'll see it. This team right now is struggling in the passing game. And at some point, you have to try to sort of inject another weapon into your offense. And if you can get the ball in the hands of that weapon nearly every single play, I think that that's a good way to go for the New Orleans Saints.
Now, this next 3 game stretch is probably going to be the most difficult of the Saints season going forward. You got the Eagles, you got the Bills, you got the Cowboys, 2 Thursday night football games.
Mm-hmm.
What are your expectations for these 3 game stretch that the Saints are going to have coming off of 2 back-to-back losses that was, like you said, winnable games, but the debacle happened late in the fourth quarter? 3 game stretch, Eagles, Bills, Cowboys. What's some realistic expectations?
Yeah, look, I think the realistic expectation is that the Saints come out 1-2 from that. And ideally, they get the win on the road here up against the Philadelphia Eagles. And then, you don't want to see them drop home games. You'd hate to see Sean Payton lose his first game on a holiday. He's right now undefeated on holidays, including Christmas, Thanksgiving, as well as Halloween. He won that game earlier this season and really what was a spooky season game. But when it comes down to it, you have this Thanksgiving Day game up against Buffalo. That's going to be a tough task for the New Orleans Saints. Now, Buffalo also lost to Jacksonville Jaguars earlier this season. So who really knows? Because nobody knows what's going on in the NFL this season, if we're being completely honest. But I think that if you come out 1-2, that's realistic. If you find a way there in any of those 3 games to get 2 wins, that's the ideal situation. Well, that's not true. The ideal situation is obviously 3-0, but realistically, ideal situation is a 2-1 result out of those 3 games. That helps the Saints maintain I'll say pace with the NFC. That's kind of a jumbled mess right now. But even if they can get out of that 1-2, which feels a little bit more conceivable, I think that still puts them in enough of a position in their stretch down the rest of the season, with the exception of their next game in Tampa Bay, that gives them a situation to where if they can win the games that they should win moving forward, then it puts them in a situation to where they're in conversation for playoffs.
Now, as we talk about the conversation for playoffs, do you think it's more beneficial for the Saints to not make the playoffs and get a better draft position, or to make the playoffs and maybe have a lackluster first game in the playoffs and get bounced out in the first round? Who do you think will be the better option? I know teams want to win, want to make the playoffs. Sometimes it just isn't the best option.
Yeah, look, I think you play to make the playoffs, right? I mean, I think that that's the better situation for them. They make the playoffs, they show that they're competitive. The thing about the draft pick is that you can get the better draft pick, but is that player actually going to pan out for you? We don't know, right? Like the NFL isn't full of first round picks. The NFL is full of day three picks and undrafted free agents. Like those are the guys that populate the NFL. And some of the biggest names, biggest quarterbacks aren't first round picks either. And I'm just going quarterback thinking about, the most high sort of level or high premier position. So I think that for the Saints, you show, and what could be more impactful for them is that instead go and show everybody that you're one piece away, that you're two pieces away, whatever it might be, so that you can start to build this team again in free agency over the course of the offseason. It's going to be a weird free agency to manage, not going to be as bad as $100 million over the salary cap, but you're still, $30 to $50 million over the salary cap at the end of the season, depending upon whatever other moves they decide to do moving forward throughout this year. So I think you continue to win, you push for the playoffs, and even if you get bounced early in the playoffs, you can show the rest of the players around the NFL that this is a coach that cares about his team, believes that they can win, that there's confidence within this organization and the team, and that the team themselves might just be one U away, high level free agent, high profile free agent from actually making a further push in the playoffs. I think that's more advantageous for them than banking on a draft pick that may or may not pan out.
I agree with you. I agree with you because I don't like any of the quarterbacks coming out in this draft class. So
Hmm.
this is what it is.
I agree.
Coming on a daily lock in with me, Ross. Why don't you give everybody your social media and where they can get the Lock On Saints podcast that I listen to at least 3 times a week?
Hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yes, daily podcast, Monday through Friday, Locked On Saints. You can find it wherever it is that you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, Ross Jackson Nola for everything in between. Absolute pleasure being here with you, man. Locked in, locked on. We got it going. We got it going. I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Appreciate you, Ross.